Hey guys, it's Luke from Mix and Made Simple, and today we're going to talk about 5 common mixing mistakes that EDM producers make and how to avoid them. Before we get started, if you are an EDM producer and you're wanting to get to that professional level sound as quickly as possible, go ahead and look in the description below and book a Zoom call with me. We'll talk about getting you enrolled in my course, Mix Immersions. Okay, so let's get started. So the first one on the list, and these are no particular order, but I do find that the first one is really common when I'm listening to like an amateur production, and that's when your production lacks depth. And when I say depth, basically we can look at a mix in 3 dimensions, right? So there's tall, which is like the frequency range, so the lows all the way up to the highs. There's the width, which is, the width like panning something hard left or hard right. And you have the side information as well as the stuff in the center, so like the kick drum, for example. And then we've got the depth. And what the depth is it's the difference in volume levels. It's just like what something is loud is going to be up front. So typically a vocal, like if you're listening in your stereo or in your in front of your monitor speakers, right? There's like a stereo field. So a vocal is going to sound like it's like right in front of you versus something like a pad or, whatever, like an arpeg, like an arp or something. It might be further back. It's going to be lower in volume and pushed further back in the mix. And so it's depth. And the problem that I hear a lot is when a producer has a track and say you're working on something and you have all these cool sounds that you come up with, like, you've got an arp here and you've got the lead thing here and you've got whatever, and you think they all sound cool. So you want them all equally heard. But the problem with that is then you end up having everything like the same volume and they clash into each other, and then your track lacks depth. You can still have it set up to where you can hear like everything in your mix, but you want to think about depth and you want to give certain things importance. And so I'm going to show you this track I'm working on right here, and I'm going to show you this example of the sound that I have that's further back in the mix, and if I had it louder, it would just be interfering with everything. You can also listen when you're listening to this mix how I have everything kind of stacked from low to high really well. So there's the kick and the bass and then the lead element, and nothing's interfering with each other, and it's sounding pretty good. So first I'm going to play just this sound, and then when I play the drop, I want you to listen for this like in the background, and then I'll show you. I'm going to turn it off and then turn it back on. You can really hear the difference. So it sounds like this when the drop hits. There's this kind of background element, this pluck. So you can hear that I'm filtering out a lot of I'm using a filter to actually push it further back in the mix. And this is the great thing about filters like this, is that if you imagine someone like yelling from really far away or hearing a noise that's really far away, it'll have like a muffled sound. So when you intentionally filter out the highs of something, it's going to give the illusion that it's further back in the mix. And so that's what I'm doing with this filter here. Not only is this lower in volume, so it's further, but I'm also filtering out, and so it's pushing it further back, and then it's going to grow and it's going to come up closer. So let's take a listen. I'm going to unsolo this and we'll listen to the entire drop. Try to pay attention to that pluck, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you what would happen later on if I turn the volume up and if it were to clash with this lead. So go ahead and take a listen. Real quick, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off and then now listen. So it's really subtle. You might not actually be able to hear it, but I promise it's in there, and that's kind of going on in the background. Doing this kind of floaty thing that kind of makes the transition to the drop a little bit, just a little bit better of a transition, more seamless. But now here's the part where you're really going to hear the difference. Okay, so go ahead and listen right here. I have this part come up, and then listen how it's basically supporting this lead pluck element that I've got right here, okay? Now if I take it away and I play it from right here, listen how it doesn't sound quite as good without it. It sounds okay, but it's nice having this in here, kind of like a supporting element that supports this melody. And then if I go like this, now watch what happens if I just filter it and I turn the volume way up. Now listen how this will just clash with the melody. You hear how that's like clashing? It doesn't sound good, but then if I turn it down, push it further back in the mix, go ahead and fix the filter again so it's getting filtered, you know, so it's not quite up front. Now check it out. Okay, you can hear that makes a huge difference, right? Okay, so it sounds so much better. I have that in there. It's supporting the lead melody. It's not clashing with it. And yeah, so you pretty much want to think about this when it comes to everything. You might come up with like a great idea for something. You know, when you're in the zone, you're producing and you find something that sounds really cool and you're like, oh, I want that. And a beginner intermediate mistake is to try to have that up and the same volume as like a lead element that you already have. And you just can't have everything the same volume. They're just going to clash with each other. So you really just have to start thinking about your production. Think about it like a giant 3D painting where, you know, you might have like a mount, like, I don't even know. You might have like a tree right here, and then you've got a mountain way in the background, right? So if you think about it in this 3D image and how you're placing sounds like that, I think it's really going to help you, and it's going to really help you to bring your tracks to that professional level. Okay, so let's get on to number 2. All right, so number 2 is thinking that you need to compress everything, and also just kind of lacking an understanding of compression in general. This I can totally empathize with, because for the longest, you know, for the first, I don't know, a few years of my production journey, I had no idea what I was doing when it came to compression. You know, I would just slap it on there and throw the threshold down, and you know, whatever. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I don't want to get that into compression right now. There's plenty of videos online where you can learn how to use compression. But what I'm going to show you is that the example here is that, you know, you don't have to compress everything, you know. So in this example here, I've got this compressor. I'm going to just show you for example's sake. I've got this pad here. And I want to turn the vocal off, actually. I've used this track quite a bit, and when I use this vocal from Splice, I get it copyright striked. So I'm going to turn that vocal off, and then just go ahead and listen to the track. So I've got this pad here, right? So listen to the difference. If I take this, I'm going to do like a 10-to-1 ratio with a fast attack, put it on peak mode, and then let's try to hear if you hear any difference when I lower the threshold onto this on this pad. You know, basically this pad that it has like no dynamic element it's not very dynamic at all. I don't need to have a compressor on there. I have some sidechain compression, but there's no real reason that I would want to put compression. And a rule of thumb you can kind of think about when compressing is that we either compress to control dynamics or we compress to shape the tone of a signal. And if you're throwing compressors on stuff and you're having a fast attack time, if you have a fast attack time, fast attack compression, if you put it on everything, is a really easy way to just destroy your mix and like kill the life of your mix, okay? And so I'm going to show you an example of this. This is just a rule of thumb that you can think about. So we want to control dynamics for certain things like vocals, especially. We almost always want to have compression on some vocals, unless that's a sample that's already compressed. So you have to keep that in mind. But if we're going to shape the tone of something, so let's say this clap, for example. Okay, so if I take a compressor, I'm going to take a compressor and I'm going to put a utility down here so you can so I can add some makeup gain. I'm going to take this and I'm going to just leave it on 4-to-1 ratio. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a really fast attack time, put it on peak mode. That's okay. And so now I'm just going to lower this threshold with a really fast attack, and I want you to hear what it does to the clap. So here's uncompressed and compressed. Okay. So what we're doing is we're just squashing the transient out of this clap. And now, so this would be considered a fast attack. A slow attack would be somewhere, you know, I guess it depends on who you ask, whatever, but like 30 milliseconds is where we're getting into slow attack. And the cool thing about a slow attack is it's going to let the transient, that initial peak poppy part of a sound, pop through. And so if I lower the threshold and play it, you can see it kind of tightens it up a little bit. And it's letting that transient pop through, versus if I go like this, and even if I add some makeup gain, now there may be times where you want to have a really fast attack and you want to tone the transient of something. So it just really depends on what you're doing. But I just want to illustrate here that if you put fast attack and you're really squashing transients and you put that on all of your sounds, it's just going to be a really quick way to kind of just like kill your mix and make it sound flat and lose the punch of a lot of stuff. So you don't need to compress everything. And if you are doing compression, at least have a basic understanding, learn what the ratio means, learn that a fast attack's going to tone down transients, a slow attack's going to let the transients pop through. Quick release is going to cause some distortion. Just learn these basic parameters of compression. It's really not that hard. And then you'll have a better understanding. You'll know what you're doing when it comes to compression. Okay. Number 3 is a really quick and easy one. And that's just that you should be mixing at low volumes every now and then. So I know it's fun to produce and mix at high volumes, but the problem with that is, first of all, if you mix louder, you're going to fatigue your ears quicker. Second, humans, we are biased towards loud. So if we hear something loud, we're just going to perceive it as better. And so it's really good, it's really good to just do a little bit of both. Okay. So mix, at like a medium volume that you're comfortable with, mix a little bit louder sometimes, maybe, turn your speakers up and go listen like in a different corner of your room or like outside your room. Also, you want to just, produce and mix at a quiet level. Because if your mix sounds really good and it's quiet, then that means you're onto something. Okay, that means it's going to sound, it's probably going to sound good when it's played louder at too. And you might be surprised that you might hear a little bit more details here and there when you're mixing quieter, even though that kind of doesn't make sense. But definitely try it out. So mix quiet, mix at lower levels as well as the medium or loud levels. Okay, so the fourth mistake that I think a lot of EDM producers make is not referencing. If you're a beginner producer, once you've got like the basics down, you should be referencing right away. And why referencing is so great is because it gives you something to aim for, and it's also going to train your ears. It's going to train your ears on basically, what you should be aiming for when you're producing and mixing. Okay, so I made a whole video about this, but there's 2 things. There's referencing, and we've got great plugins where you can throw a track in your DAW like this, or you can there's Metric A/B. It's my favorite plugin for referencing, one of my favorite plugins in general. I highly recommend getting it. Try to get it when it's on sale, because it does go on sale a lot, but you can throw in a bunch of reference tracks here. You can click them, then you can A/B like your track and the reference. You can look at the waveform, and you can match the volume, which is really important because you want to match the reference track volume to your track's volume. That way you're having like you're not hearing the louder one and thinking it's better. And if you don't want to get this, if you don't want to pay any money right now, you can also just take a track, put an audio track in your DAW, and then, route it so that it goes outside of the master, because you don't want the reference track to be going through your master channel, and then just put it off and then solo. If you hit solo, you can play the track, listen to your track, go back and forth. And this is really just going to give you something to aim for and achieve. The analogy I like to give is like, if you wanted to learn how to play basketball, you wouldn't just go into a basketball court alone, and just like start haphazardly like throwing the basketball around. First of all, you're going to be aware of basketball, watch the pros do and see what good technique looks like. And then you might have like a coach who teaches you how to do these things. So you kind of think about it like producing EDM the same way. If you just sit down and you start putting sounds together and like put music together, like musically it might be good, but sound wise, if you're not, really trying to improve your ear and you don't have a clear goal in mind, then you're just not going to improve. You might improve a little bit, but it's not going to be nearly as fast as if you reference and had like a clear vision in mind. And so not only should you reference a lot, but just listening to a lot of good music on your speakers is really helpful, like your monitor speakers or your headphones. So I got some monitor headphones right here. It's a really great way to get to know your gear. So if you have monitor speakers you like a lot, you can take them with you, listen to a lot of music on them, really get to know them. Or if you're like if you're a college student or whatever, if you have work to do on your computer, sit down, do work on your computer and just really listen to a lot of high quality music coming out of your speakers. And it's going to really, really help you grow your ear and just help you have an idea of what to aim for when it comes to producing and mixing your music. Okay, so the last one is what I call putting the cart before the horse, which basically means trying to fix a bad mix with mastering. Okay. So, if your mixes aren't good, if you don't really know how to mix to a point where your tracks are sounding really good, then you shouldn't be worrying about the master channel at all. Now, this was a big mistake that I made when I was, trying to get better at this stuff. I thought, man, there must be like a mastering trick. There's like some mastering thing I'm doing wrong. I would have a mix and I would compare it to a pro track. It didn't sound as good. And so I'd go to the master and I do like all these crazy EQ changes, which is just nonsense. So, your mix, if you really want to, what you can do is if you want, you can mix your track, compare it to your reference. If you want to compare it volume wise, if you want to like get your track to a loudness level that's like near a pro track, because the reference tracks you're going to be referencing are going to be mastered, then just put a limiter on your master channel, clank the limiter up and get to a loudness level that's like similar to the reference, and then listen to it. And if there's any issues, if it sounds bad, if the bass is wonky or something sounds off or whatever, then go back into your mix and fix it. You don't want to ever try to fix a bad mix with mastering. I've said this before, but one of the best ways to explain this is just in one sentence, which is you can make a good mix better with mastering, but you can't fix a bad mix with mastering. So if you have a really good mix and you send to a mastering engineer who like really knows what he's doing, he might be able to do like a little bit of tonal balancing on the master and some compression and then ultimately some limiting. And he might actually take your track and, this is kind of like the goal of a master engineer. He might make it slightly better. But if you take a bad mix and send it to a mastering engineer, he's not going to be able to fix it. And he might actually just go back to you and say, hey, we need a revision. We need to fix this. This is like, there's like a bunch of wonky stuff here that doesn't sound good. So that's number 5. If you're struggling to get your tracks to a professional level sound, it's not the mastering, it's the mixing. I can't stress that enough. It's in the mix. And then you can worry about mastering later, learn how to, you do want to learn how to master your track. But really it's all about the mix. And speaking of mixing and mastering, if that's something that you want to get good at fast, go ahead and, like I said before, book a Zoom call with me and we can get you enrolled in Mix Immersions. That's it for the video, guys. If that helped, I'd really appreciate it if you just like and subscribe to help my channel grow, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, see you later.